Oh man.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we
First
should.
of all,
Okay.
okay, wait, first.
We should just say okay 10
Uh,
times.
well, this is what's funny about it. So I tried Opus Clip just out of
Yes.
curiosity. I heard somebody mention it,
What
and I
is
was
that?
like, I can send it a link to the compressed FM episode from YouTube, and it will create video clips of everything. So I
Oh,
sent it
cool.
the episode that we did with Aaron Francis just to see like what is it going to generate. And it was pretty cool because like it took if Aaron was talking, it had his face across the top and then it put mine and Brad's face at the bottom. So it was like smart enough to like clip and follow our
Oh,
face.
wow.
But some of the like post recommendations are hilarious. And the fact that it's like, I'm going to rank how I think this post will do. So, for example, it grabbed this hot topic thing that we do at the beginning. And the
Oh.
beginning of the clip is okay, okay, okay. And then Brad talking about like Nintendo Switch just announced a new Zelda game.
There
And
you
so
go.
it's like the rating for it is like trending A plus. This is a hot topic right now. And I'm like, we're not a like Nintendo Switch game evaluating podcast. Like it has nothing to do with what we talk about. So I'm like, AI will never replace us.
I mean, or it's time for a pivot. We're looking for more views. We're a Switch podcast now.
I need to play more games if that's the case.
Okay, I want
My,
to talk about. Go ahead.
no, go for it.
I was going to talk about just buying gear to try out and then return because I just spent way too much money on like 15 different products that I'm going to return pretty much all of them.
I'm so bad
I
at
You did the
returning.
same.
You are?
Yeah, I never return anything. I buy them with the intention of like, yeah, I'm going to try this and then I'll return it. And then I still have it.
I return a good not like tons of stuff, but a few things. But the thing is if I so for example, I've gone to conferences before and heard people be like, "Oh, well, let's just buy a TV for the booth and then return it." Like that feels weird to me
Yeah,
because
that
I'm
is
like,
weird.
you bought it to use it and then you're like, "Oh, I'll just return it or whatever." Whereas like Brad, I can understand what you're talking about where it's like, I don't know if I like this mouse until I buy it and click on it and
Yeah.
use it for at least 15, 30 minutes, an hour to see does it match my workflow, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I had my like old school wired gaming mouse that I've had for like 10 years. The left click button finally started getting squishy on me. And so I bought like 10 mice, spent almost $1,000 on mice. And I was like, don't worry, it's fine. We're going to return them all. And so I like laid them all out, tried them all out. And then I found
Should have
that
made a YouTube video.
I found that Razer mice suck on Macs. Their software doesn't work. Like people were offering me workarounds. Yeah, we'll just like boot up a Windows VM and then like save the configurations to the onboard memory. I'm like, I'm a nerd, but come on, guys. Like, I'm not that much of a nerd. I'm not going to do that. It needs to be easier than that. So I'm still debating, but I'm going back and forth between this Logitech mouse and the Apple trackpad. And
Oh,
the
really?
Logitech mouse is just like it's not perfect. I still need to try the MX Master though.
Okay, which Logitech do you have?
G703 is the one I was looking at. It's like kind of like a big palm grip mouse. That's what I like. But I really want one of those ones with the thumb rest on the side
Trackball?
almost because it
Oh,
makes it easier to
Yeah.
pick up and move. And all these other ones you have to like physically almost grab and pick up if you're moving it around your mouse pad.
yeah. I like making fun of James because he uses a trackball. He is the only person I know that uses a
That's
trackball.
wild. His thumb's
I
gonna
don't know
fall off
anybody
one
that
day.
does.
He brings his trackball and he travels with it.
He
So
does?
next time you see him in an event and be like, "Hey James, can I see your trackball?"
That's hilarious.
Part of me really
My
just wants to go.
9-year-old
Go ahead.
my 9-year-old is down the mouse I don't know, research path right now because he plays a lot of Minecraft and he's like, "How many clicks per second can you get?" Actually, he was like, "How many CPS do you get?" I'm like, "What does that mean?" He's like, "Clicks per second." And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, I get like 97 sometimes. I'm like, that seems like a lot of clicks. I don't know. He's like, but I need this new mouse so I can have more clicks per second and do the butterfly drag.
What is a butterfly drag?
Wow.
And that might be two different things. You might be butterflying and you might be drag clicking. I'm not really sure. There's a lot, and he talks about it constantly. So if anybody has suggestions for the best drag click butterfly clicks per second mouse, let me know.
Kids go so deep on stuff, you know? It's so good that they have that level of curiosity that just drives them so far into the rabbit hole. I
I
was
will
like that.
say I did have a trackball mouse like in middle school. That was years ago. So
Is the trackball mouse the equivalent of the rolling backpack? A rolling backpack's, like, not cool, right?
probably and or like well, I guess this probably is cool, but wheelies also.
Oh,
My
the shoes with the
wheelies, yeah.
yeah.
We're like, "You're not
Do
doing
you have a
that. You're
pair of
gonna
those,
ruin your
Amy? You wear
posture."
those to conferences?
No, I do not. But actually, that's a great idea for a conference. Show up in wheelies.
Get some branded compressed FM wheelies for our next
Uh,
conference.
so I actually messaged Brad the other day because I bought these and I've picked them before. This is my 4th pair. I have worn a hole through 2 of them. And then the other pair, the strap actually came unglued. So I like live in these. They're so comfortable.
That's what we need is compressed, like, squishy sandals.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. But Henry's not too crazy about those shoes because he's like, it looks like you're just living in your house shoes. I think it's probably because they're hot pink. Funny. Okay. Let's see. Do we want to get into it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. Let me cue up the music. Where is it? I need to rename it because the file always looks funny on the back. There it is. Okay. Welcome to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web design and development with a little bit of zest. In today's episode, we are going to be talking all about these survey results from the state of JavaScript.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compress.
Hello, my name is Amy Dutton. I am a lead maintainer on the Redwood JS core team.
Hey, y'all. My name is Brad Garapi. I'm a full stack developer at Atlassian working on Confluence.
And I am Becca. I'm the developer experience lead at OpenSauce.
You are also an AI advocate.
I am. I'm one of those too. Was recently quoted as an AI advocate.
Cool. What did that happen, or how did that happen?
It was a joke.
I missed it.
Well, when we did our product hunt launch a couple of weeks ago, well, it was like a month ago now, our new feature is an AI focused feature. And so since we were all working on AI content, we all now have additional AI titles, which everyone has been asking about. So we've
Nice.
just kind of embraced them as like a second title of things that we do. So we're doing it all.
That's a whole area of stuff that I have not explored beyond like using the chatbots. You know what I mean? Need to get into that.
Here's the thing though. So I was on vacation a few weeks ago and I was talking to family members about it and they were like, I've never used ChatGPT before. I was just like, what?
Yeah.
And I was like, listen to all this stuff. And they're just totally over their head. And it just made me realize how much of a bubble I live in when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah. Even, okay, I even think this state of JavaScript survey will show us how much of a bubble we live in, because this state of JavaScript survey goes pretty wide and it really shows that certain frameworks that we think are really hyped are actually like in the minority. So it's probably a good segue to start off. This is the 2023 survey results.
Which sounds
Uh,
weird.
yeah, it
'Cause
is
it
weird.
feels
I
like
mean,
it should be 2024. Yeah, but
right. But the
um,
shirts are
I
always really cool.
did you get one?
I'll say that. No, I'm just looking at the first page of the survey. You know, they're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
support us, buy a t-shirt." They're super cool.
The thing that we always talk about at work, and I mean, Brad, you and I have talked about this too a little bit, tech Twitter versus enterprise, is like how much of the feedback that we're getting on Redwood and our framework and the work that we're doing is just tech Twitter and just a few loud voices versus what the general public wants and what they're using.
Yeah, and that's the thing about being open source is like when you're open source, uh, all the developers who want free stuff will come out and use it, and that might not be your intended audience at the end of the day. You know, Redwood is probably looking at or scales well for those big teams.
I was gonna say, Becca, do you have any insight? Because I feel like you work with a ton of different projects doing open source stuff.
Yeah, can you repeat the question? I cut out for
Oh,
a second, so I totally missed it. I'm sorry.
But I was like, did I ask a question other than I just said Becca and make a statement? I was just wondering, like, do you, when it comes to like tech Twitter versus like reality, like how much do you see that or feel that when it comes to projects? Because I feel like I'm can sometimes be hyper focused on meta frameworks. Brad's focused on Atlassian. You kind of get the breadth of it, even though it is open source. Open source is like a whole culture and economy in and of itself. I still didn't ask a question.
Yeah.
It's like I'm just making
It's been like kind of
statements.
fascinating. It's been fascinating to look at the state of JavaScript and what they talk about there, the awards that were given, and then kind of compare them to like what we see as successful or popular projects. Because I think that there's like a real contrast between what is successful and what is popular. And we don't quite have a grasp on that. And the founder of Selenium had a tweet about this recently too. What is his first name? Hugs. He goes by @Hugs on Twitter, which is like the best handle. It's amazing that he got that. Anyway, Jason Huggins, right? So he was talking about this idea of like how successful Selenium is, but nobody is talking about it, right? There aren't features that are being written about that. And so a lot of what we see, especially on tech Twitter, is like the loudest or the spiciest takes are the ones that are out there and that people are talking about. And so it's interesting to try and compare what is successful or what we should be looking at, because I think tech Twitter again is like it is in that bubble, but we haven't quite nailed what the trends are, other than like this is the most exciting thing that people are talking about. And it's like that a lot of like marketing and developer relations and that kind of stuff that pushes that stuff forward, which is good because we need that awareness. But there's that like missing piece, and that's like one of the things we're trying to solve at Open Sauce. Not a plug for Open Sauce intentionally here, but to be able to really kind of define what is the criteria for something is successful to help us figure out like, is this something that we should be adopting or that we should be looking at?
Yeah, I know, Brad, you want to talk a little bit about Remix. I don't know exactly about what, but like I feel like that even plays into this conversation. So at ReactConf, they announced, "Oh, Remix is going to take a nap," and we're all like, "What? What are you talking about?" And I remember my initial reaction being like, "This is so dumb. You guys are like self-destructing. What are you doing?" But it was like, we're gonna all those core functionality and features are part of React Router, so we're gonna focus on React Router and make that a core piece of Remix. And so it was like, okay, that's interesting. But then the more that I've talked to people that actually have projects and have built stuff, it's like, this is fantastic. This is the best news that they could have made, because I have an old crusty project with React Router and we can't upgrade, and now we can, and now there's a path. And so I think that sometimes, exactly what we're talking about. It's hard to see that sometimes based on the buzz online.
Yeah, do you want to dive into like that
Yeah.
section of the survey, the
Do you
front end framework section of the survey? Or you want to run this from top to bottom?
That's a good question. I do want to talk about demographics.
Let's start there. So the survey always opens with demographics. It talks about where people are answering from, age, gender, income, company size, all really good things to keep in mind as you're interpreting these results. Um, and there's some things in here that are, you know, unfortunate or expected or whatnot. So vast majority is coming from the United States of America, speaking English. Um, what else? We've got ages are like 30s are the most
That
represented
surprised me.
age.
It's getting older.
You think it's getting older a little bit?
Mhm. Yeah.
Maybe that just says, like, the folks who follow these things, like, maybe tech Twitter folks are all just aging as a group, and then we just
Mhm.
keep answering these surveys.
Yeah, or I mean, just the fact that the industry in general is getting older as people are kind of moving through it, like, I'm sure that in a few years, the jobs will be different, like, though right now I don't know. It's
Yeah.
hard to say, like, if you're young and just entering the industry, maybe you have more of an affinity to AI, believing that's where the industry is gonna go, whereas if you have these old crusty technologists that are like, "I love my craft and I'm gonna stick with cobalt," that I'm
But,
making
it's
large
interesting. When you
generalizations.
when you look at the years of experience chart here, 4 to 6 years is the number 1, group here.
I
So,
noticed
like,
that.
I would have expected if the average age is 30 to 39, that people would be sitting in the 10 to 15-ish years of experience. But
Right.
now we're seeing, like, okay, I've only been doing this for a few years, but I'm a little bit older, so maybe there's more career changers, late starters, things like that.
That's right. I did notice that too.
Company size, I feel like, is what we're expecting, fairly
That
large
surprised me.
companies.
That surprised me just because I feel like a lot of the audience or the people that I listen to are in the startup world. Obviously, some of that could be coming from Redwood and the fact that we, for the longest time, have focused on startups, but a majority of the people are working into that 100 to 1,000 employee range. Or even if you count above 1,000, that's 40% of the survey, which is just
Yeah.
crazy to me.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, even like, I think they should have numbers above 1,000.
Mm.
I think there's a difference between a 1,000-person company and a 10,000-person company. It's so, so different. To be honest, I've never worked at a company under 10,000, but there's a difference between a 100,000-person company and a
Interesting.
20,000-person company. You can feel it. So, I think that they should kind of expand this a little bit more because we're talking about those scaling issues and stuff. Scale doesn't
Mhm.
happen at numbers less than 100.
Yeah.
You might have your first bit of scaling at 1,000, but then there's a way different as you grow as a company. So, yeah, my feedback is this needs to get larger and display more, ranges, I think.
What's interesting is if you look at that section, there is a tab for verse yearly income. So you can see how the income measures up with the size of the company. And the, I mean, kind of as you'd expect, the larger companies have more money. And as you kind of look into that piece of it, the other interesting part of it is like, I feel like I see stuff on Twitter where it's like, hey, I just got my first, six-figure job. I'm making 300K. And if you look at the stats, it's like that range is actually very small. And most people are working within that 40 to 60K range.
Yeah, and so this to me just says, like, a lot of the people answering this survey are not San Francisco or New York-based developers,
Mhm.
right? Those
Yep.
people make easily over $200,000 once demographics or once, regional pay is considered, right? And
Yeah.
so, like,
Which is
yeah,
also a hot topic. I
yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you
Austin should be bumped up a level. We're at Atlassian, Austin is still considered like normal, and I think Austin should be bumped up a level as far as housing is concerned.
it's to me in general, it's like if you have the budget for that job, that person should get what they receive, not based on where they've chosen to live, but that's my hot take.
It's hard though because imagine like, yeah, okay, well, we'll save it for another episode because yeah, this is a good one.
The other thing that was interesting to me is when you look at higher education, a lot of the people that took this survey took or had education in a similar field, which I don't I mean, even when I think about my degree, I feel like it's an adjacent degree. I don't have a computer science degree.
I'm
So
electrical
it's
engineering. I would call it not I mean, not totally
Adjacent?
related. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, so this is weird to me. You've got people working at big companies between 30 and 39, not making as much as we think, with higher education degrees. Those aren't lining up, if you ask me.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. The other thing, that well, I don't know, here's another spicy take. All the spicy takes are gonna come out, is the gender. I think that was I know this has come up before with these surveys, that it's like, "Oh, man, it's a man-dominated industry," and I think that was my biggest disappointment with the survey overall, was if you look at the influencer section, when we get to that, there was, I think, 1 female in the entire list, and it was Cassidy Williams. That was so disappointing to me. Normally, I'm not like one to be like, I'm a female in tech or, raise the flag of women in tech, all these things. Becca and I have kind of talked about it a little bit on the side about what that is like and looks like. But I really felt it in the survey.
I thought that too. And Amy, you and I, like you said, have talked about it. And I'm also not the person that's like, oh, there's no women on this list. Right. But
Mhm.
it was just, it was practically staring at you, right?
Yeah.
To look there. And I did hear some commentary on Twitter where people were saying, well, like so and so was reaching out to their whole audience and asking for votes. And,
Mm.
like I
Yeah.
get that. That's something that I think that we need to keep in mind. Like, who, again, like we talked about who is taking this, but also like who has a commanding audience that has that exposure. And so, again, it goes back to that idea of like, what is, popularity? It's not necessarily saying like these are the best people out there. These aren't the best teachers. I mean, they might be, right?
Yeah.
They might be great at what they're doing, but there are tons of people and projects out there that aren't getting recognition because they just don't have that same popularity. And it's really, I don't know, that's a hard problem to figure out.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you
Well,
can see that in the source down below of like where people found out about
mhm.
the survey from. There's a couple individual creators on there that were calling out to their audiences to bring them in, not necessarily to vote for them per se, not trying to say that, but just saying like, hey, this survey's out and available to take. So it all depends on your reach, your audience size, and how much you push it. You'll see that later on in some of the like YouTube creators sections. I feel there that like they leaned heavily on their audience to bring in votes and stuff. And maybe foolishly, Compressed could have done a better job at that as well, knowing that, we do have an audience who listens and we want y'all to voice your opinion about the podcast when it comes to things like this.
Well, I know that they try and make the survey as scientific and objective as possible. But when it comes to stuff like that, there is an element of a leading question. So if you go and you see a list of podcasts, what do you listen to? Click, click, click. Not as inclined, especially if I'm trying to move fast, to write something in that might not have been on the list. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Um, yeah, I'll leave it at that. It's like we could make a whole nother episode on the gender piece.
Yeah. Let's move on to like features. Now, remember, this is a JavaScript survey, so we're not just talking about front end frameworks. We're talking about the language of JavaScript. So, in this features section, it talks all about features in JavaScript, how much they're used, how much they're known about, things like that. So, some of these in here surprised me, others did not. I guess let's start off with the syntax features. Anything jump out at y'all?
I don't know a lot of this stuff. That's what
Really?
jumps out on me. I don't know if it's the type of projects that I'm doing that it's maybe not as process intensive, or if it's just I lean on other libraries or things like that to do some of the heavy lifting for me.
For me, private fields jumps out as something that I just don't think will find a lot of use in the language. I say that most JavaScript programming nowadays is functional. It's not
Mhm.
object oriented, and so these private fields come into play when you're defining classes. So
Right.
I just don't think they're going to gain that much popularity. Although yes, we're gaining parity with other languages. It's probably a good thing. Um, and the other thing is the hash bang grammar. I always thought that was a node or
Mm.
like a shell thing to tell it what the runtime is. But I guess the idea is that you could have user bin env bun user bin env Dino and you're telling it
Mhm.
what JavaScript runtime to use, maybe that's why it's showing up on the list. Other than that, not sure.
Yeah, and do you
Is there
know sorry,
No, I
is
was just gonna ask if they're Go ahead,
go ahead.
Amy.
Is TypeScript that's not included?
No,
Okay.
TypeScript wouldn't be a runtime, so you can't use it in the hashbang grammar.
Well, no, not just hashbang, but, like, the entire survey. Do
Oh,
they
like TypeScript features? No, I
Right.
don't think so. I would say that that's like a separate thing.
Okay.
At
Okay,
least I
Beth,
didn't
what were
see
you
any
gonna say?
TypeScript features in there.
I was just gonna ask if there's anything that you thought would be on this list that is not there.
Mm.
Um, no, not really. I feel like everything's pretty standard. Another thing that jumped out to me as like being here, but maybe I thought was older news was top level await down in the async
Mm.
features. I kind of thought that with like ESM kind of coming to the forefront, people kind of knew that like, okay, you can await if you're in a module, an ESM module. Um, but it does look like it's like widely used and widely known about. So maybe that drops off the list the next year. All the array methods are really nice. They're like pushing immutability. So like you can sort an array or reverse an array or splice an array without modifying it in place. They'll just give you back a copy, which is great, what you're doing half the time anyways. And the string features are cool. Like you're just getting better access to replace the regex method in a lot of cases. So replacing everything not via a regex, but right with a method on the string prototype.
I think I mentioned not being familiar with some of these things, like, especially if you go down to the bottom where it says reading list. Um, but I find the same thing to be true with the state of CSS, which I feel like I'm far more proficient in CSS than I am with JavaScript. But it's still that same thing of, you get comfortable in the methods that you use and you just continue to reach for those. And sometimes you don't bother to learn the new stuff, or, if it's an incredibly new thing, sometimes you just lean to what you know is supported.
Yeah. Yeah, I've struggled on the state of CSS knowledge survey the past couple of
Mhm.
years where I'm only sitting at like 60%. Like there's
Mhm.
so much new stuff coming out and I just don't write that advanced CSS at the end of the day, you know? And especially if you're using Tailwind,
Mhm.
you might not need to use some of the new cool stuff, but when the use case arises, you'll, keep it in your head. Like I
Right.
used has for the first time a while back and I was like, this is what I need it for. And it just fit perfectly.
Mhm.
So as long as you know about it and you
Yep.
know the use case, it'll jump out at you when you need it. I will say the browser API section is something that I feel like is niche in my opinion. Looking at this, I don't use a ton of this stuff. Really, I've only barely used some of it in practice, anyways. But I do think WebSocket is the one thing on here that I've got familiarity with. I've done some of that stuff, proof of concept stuff, but nothing out in production. But it is something that I've been pushing at work, saying, "Hey, if things are loading slowly, let's spin up some WebSockets and like, push some data that way." There's different ways than just server waits and responds with a whole chunk.
Mhm.
And so I think like backend technologies, like let's say Java, Spring Boot stuff, need to kind of get on these newer bandwagons of how we can deliver data to the browser because JavaScript has cooler ways to like ingest them.
Yep. One thing that I think is interesting about JavaScript versus, like, other languages, like CSS, is that you don't correct me if I say something dumb or wrong, but you don't have to wait for complete browser adoption on something because you have things like Babel or compilers and builders and bundlers that will handle all that for you if it's not immediately available within the browser. Whereas like CSS, you're either having to use at support or you're having to write these fallbacks and things like that in case it's not supported. So in some ways, it almost feels like you can push the language forward a little bit faster because you're not waiting on the browser to do it for you.
But I would say that JavaScript and HTML and CSS are so different. HTML and
Mhm.
CSS fail so elegantly where they'll like do nothing. Whereas JavaScript is like, we're going to crash and that's it. Like you have to handle those cases there. Whereas CSS, it's a rule I don't know. I'm just going to not do anything. And it's kind of like the perfect degradation case.
Or just like displays funny.
Yeah.
Like a toddler.
Yep.
I really loved the language pain point section. And it actually made me laugh a little bit because number 1 on the list is static typing. And then number 4 on the list is TypeScript support. And those two, in my eyes, are at odds with each other. Like I don't think JavaScript should adopt TypeScript. That's not the way it should go.
Hot take.
Right? They need to come up with their own thing. That's fine. TypeScript is compiled. Like there's going to have to be a way to do this without a compile step. JavaScript, the language, can't just be like, oh, we're a compiled language now. Like ain't never going to happen. So I think that static typing and that proposal that was there, which were types as comments, is going to be something that like will get revisited down the line. But this whole TypeScript support thing really jumped out at me as like, I don't think this will ever happen, like verbatim supporting the TypeScript compiler in the language.
I
What are
wish that
y'all's
sorry, I was looking at the comments. Like, I wish that people did a little bit better job on the comments or something, because they're not super useful, or at least like a key summary or takeaway of what the comments are. Like TypeScript support. If you click on it, a lot of people just wrote TypeScript. It is not TypeScript. That's not really a comment.
But I think, okay, yeah, some people are specifically calling out TypeScript isn't built in, but I think what they mean is like the language needs types. But yeah, it's muddying the message there for sure. Dates, which is a problem that will be solved soon, hopefully.
It's always how dates has never not been a problem.
Temporal's coming.
The other thing that's interesting about dates is also when you start talking about typing around that, because it's like, do you have your own date type, or is it a string?
Well, Remix has something called single fetch now, and React Server components are out. So you can just send date objects over the wire, apparently. I don't know how this magic all happens, but yeah, apparently with Remix in a loader now, you can just send a date object and it will be inferred properly, like stringified and then unstringified on the other side. So I don't know how it happens, but that's some magic that I'm into. Where are you guys at on like the whole ESM versus CJS thing? Are you just ESM only at this point, or you still feel like you really need to support CommonJS?
We're trying to migrate all of our packages over for that Redwood supports, and it is a pain.
To pure ESM?
I don't know the entire process. I don't know which way they're going, or I don't understand the conversation. I just smile and cringe when they talk about how hard it is.
It's very hard to support both.
Very hard. It's
Yeah.
very hard.
But if you support just one, then it's really no problem. It's summertime while we're recording the podcast. Yeah.
I love that we saw Gus. I'm assuming it's Gus.
Yeah, that was Gus. He is a funny cat.
Oh man. So in this reading list at the bottom, is there anything, Brad or Becca, that you're like, I'm gonna check that out? It is on my reading list as well.
This was an interesting section because I was like, what's reading list? And then I realized it's a feature of the survey. As you're reading the survey, you can mark something to read about later.
Oh, interesting. I didn't catch that.
And I think it makes sense that error.cause is at the top of the list. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of times, like when you just get a message in a stack trace, that kind of sucks. So error.cause is, I don't know, pretty good. You can pass in the error object to the thing. So kind of nice.
I'm a little confused. I didn't dig in, but like, why is the metric up to 442%? I guess, is it based on how many times that's listed on the survey? So if you click it once, it counts as a vote. It's just weird that like it's saying 44% of.
Yeah,
I guess
that is weird.
And that's not 44% of respondents either, because it's saying like 2,989 respondents marked error.cause, but there's like 18,000 people that filled out the survey. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know. That last one doesn't make any sense to me.
That's very strange. I was kind of curious because like Alpine JS is listed, Party Town, Solid, and Quick, but there's no other frameworks, meta frameworks that are listed, and those aren't all meta frameworks, but just kind of in the realm that I live in.
Yeah, and I think this will make sense when we go on to the libraries section, when you
Oh,
talk about
let's do
things
it.
I have heard of and things I haven't heard of, because those are a lot of the libraries that like are less used, less known
Mhm.
about. So this is where I feel like I have a lot of thoughts when we start getting into the front end framework stuff, but
Same.
we'll start with like I guess this first part, libraries, experience and sentiment. Um Kind of crazy to see Webpack at the top of this list at this point. I'm surprised.
What were you expecting?
Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense because it's like the most widely adopted, build and bundle tool. But knowing the satisfaction and experience that people have with Veet, which it shows in the sentiment, it's super, super, super positive. It just seems like everybody hasn't migrated over, and therefore Webpack is still sitting on top. So looking at this, it's almost like a snapshot of like what the majority of people are building with, regardless of like how much we like newer technologies. Webpack, React, and Jest. Boom. That's the
Mhm.
common stack. Even if people want to move to other technologies, that's what's
Mhm.
most in use.
Yeah, so in this, it's saying that the red stuff is the sentiment, like the negative sentiment.
Yeah.
Yep. So the bright blue is like I've used it, and then the green and
Got it.
red sub bars are like I liked it or I didn't like it.
So this is also interesting is we've gotten some criticism at Redwood because we offer Storybook out of the box. And people have said, "Why are you using Storybook? Like you don't really need it." That's potentially causing framework bloat. And I know for me, I like that Storybook's included. We don't ship with it. So the first time you run Yarn Redwood Storybook, it will download everything. So it's like integrated, but we're not going to stick it in your code base if you don't need it or if you've never called it or run it. Storybook here has a 66% like happy.
I was actually
Yeah.
surprised by that. I'm not the biggest storybook fan, and to see
Yeah.
the satisfaction rate, I was like, okay, people who are into it are really into it.
Well, and maybe that's the better narrative there is that it accomplishes a very specific job. And if that's your job, then you like it and you use it. But if it's not your job, you
Yep.
don't use it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't have as much widespread use, but those who do use it like it. Yeah.
But I also like want to go back to those demographics piece, because if you're talking about people that work within larger companies, it makes sense that Storybook would be more popular, because that's where it really shines is when you're working with a large team of developers. You need to document your components, or you're a front end developer trying to hand something off to a back end developer. If you're on a smaller team, you might have a team of full stack developers that they're like using all those pieces, and you don't necessarily have a dedicated front end team that's trying to hand elements off. So, I just wish that there's like uh, better summaries to help interpret the data, because feel like I'm making a lot of assumptions here.
Yeah, I agree with that. That would be interesting. It would also be interesting to see the breakdown of their experience level in voting for each of these, because I think that we miss that a lot, and that provides a lot of insight into like what are new folks using or people who have been around for a really long time. You get a very different perspective, and I think that I would like to talk about that more at some point of how do you get that buy-in to move from maybe an older way of doing things to a new way of doing things, or what does that conversation look like? How do we do that better? Because I feel like a lot of tech is just not doing that well.
Okay, this is the perfect segue. Thank you so much. How do you move from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things? If you look at this list, and this is where I'm going to go on my remix tangent. Remix is number 42 on this list. It's very, very, very low on the list, if you ask me, of how many people have used it. Satisfaction is pretty good. It's like, 80%, 90% would use it again. But what's funny is that the majority of the apps built with Webpack, React, and Jest, those classic apps, are pretty much using Remix as of today with the Remix router, right? It's in a really interesting position where Remix is low on the list. But what I think is going to happen in the coming years is that React router is going to show up on this library thing and be so far up at the top, it's not even funny because like everybody's pretty much using it at the end of the day. If you're using like a vanilla React project. And so it's really interesting for me to see Remix so low on usage when truly the core of it is being used everywhere. And actually, if you look at the changes over time, Remix actually went down a little bit in satisfaction. So super interesting to me. Maybe it's just because of all the changes that are happening lately or whatnot, but between the Next.js stuff and the Remix stuff, I think there's a lot of mud in the water at this point.
Brad, how are you seeing the changes over time? Is there a function for that?
If you scroll down directly under that big old list of libraries and their sentiment, there's like those
I
cool
see it now.
whooshy graphs.
Yeah. The technical term.
So Webpack is
Yeah.
flying to the left. It's getting very unpopular. React and Jest are still pretty high. But the ones that I see that are just cruising, like Vite is just so far up and to the right. It's not even funny. PNPM is very up and to the right. Vtest and Playwright are all up and to the right. And what I'm noticing, if you go down to the library tier list next, is that all of the things that are like S tier are all of our build and testing tools. We as an ecosystem are happy with our build and test tools because like 3-4 years ago, that's all we were complaining about. Webpack sucks, Jest sucks, TypeScript compilation sucks. And I think we fixed it. Like look at the S tier stuff. Like we've settled. And now what we're debating on is like look at all the frameworks just bundled up in the A and B tier. Like people are fighting to figure out who's going to use these tools the best and who's going to adopt the new rendering strategies the best. And is it Remix isn't even on this list, which I'm laughing at because I feel like it's so in the fray with all of these conversations. Is Redwood's not on this list
Redwood's
either.
not on this list either.
So it's like all these frameworks that are pushing for the next generation of like React aren't showing up here. And that's kind of funny, right? Because it's like it's an uneasy time. People are trying to figure out React server components. And then SvelteKit's over here going up and to the right. People love us because we're just doing what we're doing. And the React ecosystem is kind of figuring it out right now.
It will be interesting with Svelte to see what happens with the release of version 5 because things do get a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
If
And
you
it's
look at
starting to
index
look
text.
a little bit more like React in some ways.
Sure is. But I mean, major props to Astro.
They do what they do.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, well done. Yep.
Yeah, Astro it's so weird. It started solving such a narrow use case and now it's just expanding, in such a great way.
Well, and I mean, I feel like this is a marketing story that is just perfect because I've been thinking more about marketing with Redwood. So I think maybe that's just where my head is at. But if you can focus on one problem that you're trying to solve for one market and do it really well, and that's like a thing that nobody really wants to do. They like to believe I'm a multifaceted person. My product is multifaceted. I want people to know all the things that we can do. But like Astro, they start off and they're like, we're just content. If you don't have a content site, pick something else. They did that really well. And now they've started to branch off into other areas. And now they've released Astro DB. And people really do look at them for other things than just a content element. But they did the content site thing well first, and then they branched out. So, I mean, well done to them for being in that S tier.
They just have such a good reputation too. I
Mhm.
think that their documentation is always solid. The way they interact with their community is solid. How they try and like create this contributor ladder so people have room to grow. It shows as kind of like the standard to so many other projects. Like people are looking at that, and I think that that helps in the adoption and the popularity. I wonder, like, is Starlight considered? That's their
Docs
um
template.
yeah. So is
Oh,
that
that's for their
separate from Astro?
documentation. No, it's like a documentation piece. Is it?
It's like a template that you can use if you want to
Yeah.
start a documentation site. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say it's
Okay,
like a
because I was just
competitor to Docusaurus.
yeah, that's
Yep.
what I was wondering if it would appear separately or if it's just all part of Astro.
Probably not. I think it's more like a starter kit for Astro.
Mhm.
And I think another
Right.
reason they're killing the game is their freaking developer experience is so good. That cute little
Mhm.
Houston guy and their CLI is so good. I love it.
Yeah, the branding is definitely on point.
Mhm.
Oh, and all their migrations are done via code mods. So like when you're updating, you just run a code mod. They make everything so easy to do when you're working in their ecosystem.
Nice.
Okay. On to meta frameworks next.
Oh, yes, this is my favorite section.
This is another one that got under my skin. I feel like so many options like aren't shown here. Oh, look at this. Docusaurus is on the meta framework section.
Yeah, I would
What?
say
Weird.
to me, it has a single use case. I'm not sure if you'd wanna buy like, to
Yeah.
buy, you'd wanna, build a site on anything else other than documentation on Docusaurus, but it is kind of its own thing. This was put out by Meta, by the way. It's a Facebook
Oh,
product.
yeah,
Oh, is it
yeah.
really? I did not
Mhm.
know that.
Yeah, if you go to redwoodjs.com/docs right now, our documentation is built on Docusaurus.
We use Docusaurus for our documentation and for our courses.
Do you like it?
Yeah, so our documentation was already on Docusaurus, and then I had to move some content over and our courses over. So I was going back and forth between Starlight and
Mhm.
Docusaurus, and the process to move over from Docusaurus was a lot easier than I thought. And it does really well for SEO. So there's a lot of
Mm.
built-in stuff that they have that makes it easy, and it's nice for contributors too. It's not like a difficult process to get up and running with it. So I've been pretty happy with using it and now having that like unified, because we were using Doxify for our courses, which was not ideal.
I think for us right now, Docusource does a good job of versioning. So when you're trying to provide historical information, it does a good job of like grouping things so that you can see this is the current version. Here's our canary documentation and things like that. But we've talked about trying to find ways to dog food that in the future. So I'm not sure that we will always be on Docusaurus, but that's the way that it is right now. And this is
This is another weird one. Where does so Remix doesn't show on this list, but it does show on a list like in this chart. Oh wait, you have Remix
oh,
in your
let's go
chart?
to
I don't have Remix. Oh, there it
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
it's
it's at the
low.
very bottom
Yeah.
in terms of
Okay.
adoption. I wanna know with Next.js, I wanna know more information because I feel like Next.js is technically 2 meta frameworks. Are you going with the Pages API or the app API?
Yeah.
And I really want more information about the app experience and how people are with RSC. What's really interesting, if you want to get into hot takes and things like that, Tanner Lindsley is working full time on
Yes.
TanStack Start right now, which is really interesting. I'm a huge fan of Tanner. Hung out with him at React Conf, but he was just tweeting about, okay, what's the ROI, so the return on investment and going all in on RSCs. And it's
He's
just
not
a
liking it. He's low on it.
fascinating conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, even if you look at Remix, Michael and them have been skeptical,
Yeah.
about at least next implementation. It's just an interesting thing to talk about. I want to know that. What's the sentiment around RSCs?
Yeah. Maybe it'll show up here somewhere in these lists. I also want to know what happens when Remix kind of just rolls back to Remix to React Router.
Mhm.
does it fall off the meta framework list and all of a sudden it's just a library that every React app uses? It almost kind of falls out of this chart entirely, right?
Well, it goes back to the question, what is a meta framework? What makes a framework? And I think, the router is probably the
Build
biggest thing.
tool and file-based routing maybe? Yeah,
Yeah.
so React Router is a config will be a config-based router a vtest with a Vite plugin.
Right, right.
So it's kind of like it doesn't give you that out of the box where it's like, "We configured Vite for you with our plugin there, and you can use some files," but instead it's just the first thing you install after you install React, you know? And so it just turns into a library kind of.
Yeah, the other piece of it is data fetching. How does the framework handle data?
React Router will have it has loaders and actions built in just like
Interesting.
Remix. So it's just a library that's doing this.
So then how does it handle, I guess, with, React 19, you have server actions? So that's what they're calling it, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
then it's like, okay, that takes on the, server actions and mutations piece, right?
Yeah, the Vite plugin is what handles that, like looking at your loaders and actions, defining your routes, and moving them to the server.
Yeah, so to me, that's what a framework does. You can
Kind
add on other
kind of, yeah.
things, but that's like, if you look at the commonalities across all of them, that to
Yeah.
me, that's the table stakes.
Yeah, it's so weird though because right, library and framework debate. You install this React Router and use it rather than you write your code inside of Remix, right? Like they flipped it.
Mm. So strange.
Okay, let's see. Coming down to the bottom here were the other meta frameworks. Adonis made this list, some
Oh,
backend
interesting.
ones. Nest made this list, another backend framework.
I haven't heard about 11T in a while.
Yeah.
Redwood made this list.
Nice. Which where are you at?
Other meta frameworks, one more
Oh.
down.
Oh, I see right here. Here we go.
I've never heard of Refine, but I just clicked on it and it looks like an admin dashboard builder for your React apps.
See, like, this makes me so sad. 14 people. But are these written in? That's another question.
Those are write-ins, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So again, are these leading questions or how does that work? And I know we did not uh endorse for write-ins.
Yeah.
So
And I love the section below that where it's talking about the happiness. So it looks like it's the
Mhm.
first year they monitored this, but it's too bad. I really wish this had been going on for like the past 4 or 5 years because there's been a lot of meta frameworks come and gone. If you think about like the Gatsby days and stuff. So I'd
Mhm.
be curious to see where we are. I think once we get over the RSC hump, we're going to see this kind of skyrocket because
Mhm.
I think we're getting really close on like good meta frameworks as far as the front end is concerned. And then we'll start complaining about back end integrations, as
Yeah.
we've been alluding to lately.
A year ago, November, I was at Jamstack, which I don't think they do that conference anymore. It's put on by Netlify, and they do a big JavaScript survey as well. And I don't know if they put one out or not. We'll need to look, but they asked this question for Meta Framework happiness because I know that was a huge win for Redwood. Even though the audience wasn't very big, the users that we do have are incredibly happy. So, I think that says something in terms of future path. uh, Gatsby would be another example of why this information matters. The happiness was very low on it. And when you start to combine that with adoption rate, it's like, well, it is now where it is. If you come up here to the top, where was it? Or I guess it was the previous page where we were looking at adoption and just the future of it. It was still continuing to go down.
Yeah, I think next year, Gatsby, where is that on the list? It's okay, it's now at number 3. It was number 2 last year. I bet you Astro passes it up next year.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, hot takes and opinions. That would be there's number 1.
Meta framework pain points are making me laugh. It's
Oh,
it's
that is
all
helpful.
basically talking about Next.js.
Yeah.
So I feel like next issues literally is number one. Excessive
Oh, you can't click
complexity.
on the comment on that one. Oh,
Oh,
I guess
yeah.
you click
Excessive
into it.
complexity. Magic enhanced complexity. I feel like it's all very much targeted at next. People are specifically calling out next.
Great one.
Number 3 is deployment, which everybody's talked about deploying next
Mhm.
elsewhere. And then
Yep.
what was it? Scrolling down a little bit. I think the real meat and potatoes of things is number 11, front end and back end integration. This is
Mhm.
what is going to start rising to the top once meta frameworks get over the RSC hump, or once we really figure out, the data loading pattern. If we're not using RSCs, fine. If we're using RSCs, fine.
Mm.
Then we're going to say, great, now we have access to the server. How can we, as one developer, get way more complex on the server side and use one framework to do it? Instead of the picture that we're seeing today, where it's like, how do we stitch together Laravel or
Mhm.
Adonis or something like that with something on the front end? Server components issues is actually written in there at number 17 too.
Okay. Well, and I also see SSR, which those two things are
Yeah.
kind of coupled on the development side.
This makes sense. I mean, I think this is a very accurate representation of how people are feeling today. But I wish number I
This
wish number
one
11 was higher, but
This one's really interesting to me. I need to read some of the comments, but when we were talking to Aaron Francis, one of the things we were talking about is within the JavaScript ecosystem, one of the things that we really lift up is the composability piece of things. And so when you're talking about the JavaScript ecosystem, you're like, oh, hey, I'm just gonna, swap out my ORM. It's like, whoa, that's a huge core tenet of your application for you just to swap that out. That's like a really big deal. Whereas like Laravel, they have more of this kind of dictatorship, or even Rails with DHH. It's gonna be like, this is how we're gonna structure things. This is where your stuff goes. And that ecosystem seems to work really well for those frameworks. And we don't have that in JavaScript. I frequently see people saying, where is the Laravel or the Rails of JavaScript? But the question is also, do people even really want that based on the culture of it? And it's kind of this weird balance. I I like to think that they do, but I'm not sure if that's just what I want and putting that on, like projecting that onto people. But the fact that for a meta framework pain point is lock in, the fact that it's like, oh, we want to decide and you've locked me in.
I'm looking at the comments here and it all says like Vercel and Next.js vendor lock-in. So I don't necessarily think it means like library lock-in.
Where's that like deployment lock in?
I think it means more so like Next.js is becoming married to Vercel, and therefore you don't get the same experience elsewhere, and so it's not as portable as you might want it. And
Mm.
if you pick Next, you have to pick Vercel, and kind of vice versa, and then et cetera, et cetera. So
Which is interesting because I feel
yeah,
like Vercel is in a collect them all right now because they have SpellKit, they're the major sponsor with Astro, they're
yeah.
sponsoring TanStack, all those things.
Yeah, that one was spicy. Lots going on in the meta framework world right now. I honestly think it's the most exciting part of JavaScript today.
Yeah, well, that's exciting to me too because I consider myself a framework junkie. I just like knowing how everything works. Do you want to take a look at testing?
Yeah, I think there's just one or two things I want to call out here.
Okay.
With testing, I want to call it some underdogs. I am amazed at how low mock service worker is.
Mm,
This library needs to be skyrocketed to the top. 100%. If you're mocking API calls, if you're testing anything that makes a network call, mock service worker is 100% the way to do this. Stop mocking fetch. This actually just lets you send network requests and intercept them at the server or at the service worker level. So you don't actually have to like really change your code implementation at all. You don't mock anything. You just define a handler file that says intercept these requests, return this test data. Done. It's so good, and I use it not only for testing, but I also use it for mocking APIs when the backend's not ready. So like for my project to work, I can just flip one flag and every single response in the app is being mocked. It's like really, really good for developer experience and writing tests. People are sleeping on it.
Tweet that whole section.
Yeah. Testing library is getting the credit it deserves. And I'm surprised that Playwright hasn't quite passed Cypress yet.
Mhm.
I was thinking the same thing. I was actually pretty shocked with that.
Yeah.
But again, I think that goes back to the data and the demographics. If you have older code bases, they're probably using Cypress. It would take a lot to migrate all of their tests over to Playwright. So is it a brownfield project or is it a greenfield project?
Brownfield.
Oh, that's what we called it at Zeal.
What's weird? No mention of the Node test runner in here anywhere. Node
Mhm.
recently got a test runner. It looks very similar to everything else, but I think that's not going to gain popularity like VTest did, because VTest handles all the TypeScript and ES modules and all that stuff for you. So I think Node will just fall a little bit behind there because VTest offers so much out of the box, like
Mhm.
transform and plugin wise.
Very cool.
Joppa, the test runner for Adonis, shows up in the other testing tools list. Also
Okay.
interesting. So maybe it's getting use outside of the framework.
This is also interesting under testing tools. I was going to say the Storybook is number 2. I don't necessarily think of it in terms of testing. You do have, I guess, visual regression testing, which is really
Yeah.
helpful. And they've started to add more tools for unit testing that would almost replace a need for Playwright. But to me, that's more of a preview documentation tool than it is a testing tool. But again, that's just how I use it, maybe
Yeah.
versus reality.
And then I do like the testing tools happiness graph. I'm not sure why we're declining here. I think testing tools are absolutely sufficient and getting, incrementally better year over year. Like I said, VTest with testing library with mock service worker and Playwright is like the gold standard, if you ask me. Very easy to work with, very easy to set up. I don't see a whole ton of improvement nowadays that needs to be made there.
Well, there you go. Testing tool pain points is
Yeah,
mocking. So
mocking.
Brad has just provided you with a solution.
You still have to mock. At the end of the day, no matter what framework you use, you still have to mock stuff. And it's challenging. Mocking is challenging, but that's not a problem that I don't think we'll ever just snap your fingers and it will be solved. It's something you do have to practice at and get good at. I almost gave a talk about mocking at that conference.
Ah,
Yeah, just like, here's all the hard things to mock. I'm going to show you how to do it.
that would be cool. I got accepted to a talk this morning. That's exciting.
Nice.
It
Where at?
actually does fit into this conversation. So I'll be speaking at Momentum in October. And so coming to Cincinnati. And my talk is going to be the JavaScript framework cage match. I
Oh,
really wanted to
nice.
add death
That's awesome.
cage match, but that's a little bit more violent.
That's awesome.
Little bit.
Okay. Let's see. I just realized the hours just flown by.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys want to highlight?
I'm looking at build tools real quick. Nothing jumps out. Vite is taking over. ESC is declining. This all makes sense. And then monorepo, I don't even have enough experience to talk about it.
On the mobile and desktop section, I think that's above
right here.
build tools.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. So I think Expo was just announced as the official React Native framework. So it's interesting to kind of see it like pitted against React Native. That's not it exactly, but like if you scroll down to the experience and sentiment section, Expo, 49% of respondents have never heard of it, which I don't know if it's because maybe a lot of the folks who are taking this don't have mobile experience. That maybe makes the most sense for me. but it's been around for a while and pretty
Mhm.
popular. It's officially the framework, but I feel like unofficially it's kind of been for quite some time.
Maybe you could help explain that to me. Is it like is it React is to Next.js as React Native is to Expo? Is Expo a meta framework around React Native?
Um, well, I don't think it's a meta framework. Amy, do you think would you call
I
it a meta
mean,
framework?
uh, I don't know all the ins and outs. I'm not proficient in native development, but I would say like their talk. Do you watch their talk at ReactConf, Brad?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Okay, maybe we can link to it in the show notes, but a guy named Evan Bacon, not to be confused with Kevin Bacon, gave that talk, where he presented for Expo, and apparently it was mind-blowing. I missed the talk. I was working the booth, but apparently it was mind-blowing in terms of them being able to create an application on mobile, and then it's ready for a desktop. So I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of times, and I mean, this is just where I'm coming from because I'm working in the browser. I sit at my computer all day. I think more of like, oh, here's an app for the browser. Now I've got to make it mobile friendly so you can see it on your phone. And some of that's just because I'm dealing with web technologies. Whereas Expo, and you're talking about creating a native application, that's their starting point, and then making that available on the web.
The ReactConf app was actually Expo.
Oh, interesting.
It
I'm not
sounds
sure I even
like
used it even though I
it
was
sounds
there.
like there's a relation here based on the docs that I'm looking at that Expo can be used with Expo is used with React Native or on top of
Mhm.
React Native or something like that. So maybe it is that kind of a thing where it's like you're writing React Native, but like with the help of Expo to get things done or to route or to do views or something.
Mhm, and it does
Yeah,
have React
Expo
Server component or, support.
yeah, it just handles a lot of stuff that you would expect React Native to almost, right? So,
Okay, yeah.
I think most people are using that. It's a lot easier to get up and running.
Doesn't it have support to help you be able to launch within the app stores?
That's a good question. I think so. I just talked to Caddy from the Expo team last week, and I know that their process for creating the React Conf app was pretty quick. Like they did that app in
Mhm.
2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was like a last minute idea. I think somebody pitched it, and she was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." So she
Wow.
got it up and running in all of those different ways, and was able to submit to the App Store with only one rejection, and it just required a clarification for them. So
Wow. Invite her on the podcast.
yeah, I will. She's awesome.
So much. Other tools is a big section, but I don't know if we want to just skip over it for the interest of time. There's a lot of good stuff in here, like runtimes, hosting services, backend frameworks.
What do you guys think about Zod?
Love it. Use it.
I
I
have
feel like
not used Zod, but
I feel
it
like
is definitely an exciting project.
anytime you start sending things over the network, like, you have to have a way to make it type safe. And that's I feel like where Zod comes in, and you just get something back, you run it through Zod verification, and then now your TypeScript matches that half of your project. Um, whether it's query params or just like form data coming through, Remix is big on both of those things. You kind of have to use Zod to get your types in line as you're throwing things over the network.
The graphics and animation stuff, this is about what I would expect with 3GAS, D3, Framer Motion, Lottie, and GreenSock, and then React Spring being 6.
I've never heard of Lottie.
Yeah, so Lottie is really cool. You can take, say, like an animation within After Effects. So that's an Adobe product
Mm-hmm.
that
I remember that company.
yeah. So it's just easier to animate stuff in After Effects than it is sometimes in code. Like you have a little bit more control over it. You're using
Okay.
visual tools instead of using code. But then you can take a animation in After Effects and export it as a Lottie file. And what that basically does is it gives you an SVG that you can then use to have your animation. And I think you can still trigger things within code. So I've used them where I've created animations in After Effects and even pulled them into no code or low code tools like Webflow. It is pretty magical how easy it is to get things to work. So a lot of times when you go to a website that does have a complex animation, a lot of times those are Lottie files and they're incredibly small. The file size is kind of ridiculous. And then GreenSock has been around forever. They were around doing Flash animation things and then really pivoted into the JavaScript ecosystem when Steve Jobs killed that off. Another Adobe product by acquisition.
There's so much in other tools. Do we cut for time? There's like so much in here that's good.
I tell you what, I got an idea. Let's do this. So the next host only episode, we talked about doing a like gear tools thing. We might not even have to split that up into tools and gear because I think I could talk for hours on both. But let's slide some of those tools section into that tool episode.
Okay, sweet.
And I think that way we're not pressed for time, and that will also give the other episode a little bit more. Do you guys want to skip for picks and plugs, or do you want to?
I'm fine with either. I'm prepared if we do it.
I had a good idea and then I lost it.
Okay, Brad can go first.
Okay. Yeah, I'll intro it. So for the next segment of the episode, we will do our picks and plugs where we'll pick something that we like and plug something generally that we've worked on or that we would like to raise awareness for. So Brad, start us off.
I'm such a gamer now. We're taking a family trip to upstate New York in a couple days now. We're leaving on Monday. And I was looking for something to do on the ride up. And so I've got that Switch that I love. And I decided to get Super Mario Odyssey, which was like the first big Mario game that came out for the Switch. And I've been having a lot of fun with it. I played like the first level or so, and then I'm going to save the rest for the airplane ride up. But super cool. Like it's a 3D Mario. I haven't played one of those since N64 days. And it's just been like interesting to see what's changed since then. And let's see, plugs. I'm always just going to keep plugging my YouTube channel, youtube.com/BradGarapy. I've been making a lot of videos for Cloudinary lately, who's been tagging me on YouTube, but I got to put out some of my own here now that I've got some free cycles.
Cool. Becca, are you ready? I got one.
Go for it.
Okay. So I will put a disclaimer on this. I've purchased it. It hasn't come in yet, but I'm very excited about it. So I just bought the Peak Design small tech pouch. So I am a huge fan of Peak Design's products. If you've seen any of them, I have their backpack as a daily carry. I'll hold it up. Huge fan. And one of the reasons that I love this backpack is because it's configurable. And then gonna say I have their larger tech pouch. So the new one's supposed to be about half the size. But one of the things that's interesting about the Peak stuff is they base their design off of origami. So I just dropped a battery. But you can stick stuff in these little pockets and it kind of all accordions out. So it makes it really easy to find what you're looking for. So the small version was just released. They just released a bunch of new pouches and bags and things like that. So go check it out at peakdesign.com. And then I'm going to highlight my newsletter, brokencomb.dev. So if you go there to sign up, the idea with a broken comb is that in your career, you usually go wide on topics. And as you gain more experience, then you start to go deep. So you get this like broken comb looking graph of your experience. And so the idea with the newsletter is that you go wide and deep on tech. So go sign up at brokencomb.dev.
Can I go back and talk about that Peak Design thing?
Yeah.
What kind of stuff do you like to put in it? It's like I'm looking at this thing here, and this guy's got like a charger, a charging cable, maybe a wallet. Like, is this just kind of like a more durable purse replacement for you, or is this like tech only, like stuff like that?
Yeah, so I have tech only stuff in it. And
Okay.
man, this is kind of embarrassing because if you go look, their products can be pricey, but I've kickstarted almost all of their stuff. So I have I have almost their entire line of products, but, so their tech pouch, I just keep tech, like, with cords. I have chargers in there. It's just great for keeping it all bundled together. If you do put tons of things in here, this pouch can get pretty beefy, which is why I'm excited about the smaller version tech pouch. I also have their wash pouch, which I really enjoy. I think it's probably even better if you're a dude because like there's a zipper on there just for if you have a razor. And the way they designed it, it's like we don't want whiskers and things like that with your toothbrush. So it's like, oh, that's a cool pocket, but I don't shave my face. So, but you know, it's a great bag, and I really do like it. I travel with it. Their packing cubes are really cool, and what's cool about their packing cubes is there's also a dirty clothes pouch on it. So it's like a divider almost within the pouch. And so I like it, the fact that I can wear clothes and then
Oh,
put it in the
sick.
dirty side. And it still is all within that same pouch. So like when I'm trying to repack my bag, everything still fits because it's in the same configuration, but it's not gonna mix up my clothes.
Okay,
Um,
these look really, really good. Like, because
Yeah,
I
and sorry, I didn't
yeah.
mean to cut you off. Their
Oh,
camera bags are really good. So even if you're not a photographer or if, you know, whatever you travel with gear, the thing that I like about it is their dividers have Velcro. So you can reconfigure how the bag is laid out, which is crazy. So depending on what gear I'm traveling with, whether I'm traveling with a camera or not traveling with a camera, I can reconfigure the bag. And that's also been helpful even on trips where if I go somewhere and then I get a souvenir or you get swag from the conference, you can reconfigure the bag based on how it is on the fly.
super cool. I've never invested into like one of those really fancy tech backpacks. I've got this Oakley backpack right here that's lasted me for just years. I'm just kind of waiting till it dies, but it's
Yeah.
never gonna die, you know. But it would be cool to upgrade. But it's that one's kind of perfect too. I just
Yeah.
don't need that much. I need a laptop sleeve
The
and then places to put junk.
I will pull this one back up. The thing that I do like about this backpack is the fact that there is a side zipper that goes all the way down so you can access any layer of the bag. So
That's
if you
cool.
pack something deep into the bag and you need to get to it, you don't have to unpack your entire bag to get it. You can just
Yeah.
open the side pouch and get it out from the bottom.
Awesome.
Wait.
Cool. All right, I'm ready. So my pick this week, my oldest told us that we all need to have 3 goals to work on this summer. So I
Wow.
chose half marathon running. I've
Nice.
never run a half marathon, but I just get so bored when I run. Like, really, I have ADHD, and it's just like I can run a mile and then I'm just like, I don't want to do this anymore. But I bought an app. It's called Joggo, and I paid a lot of money
Hmm.
for it, which is doesn't make any sense, right? But I just like needed the accountability because once you run 26 miles, you get the app for free. So I'm like, I'm gonna do this because I
Oh.
Sick.
I want my money back. But they have interval runs. So it's like run fast for 30 seconds and then walk for a minute. And I'm like, I could do this for a really long time. I actually really like interval running. And apparently people run marathons. It's called the
Mhm.
Jeff. So I'm
Oh.
gonna think about doing the Jeff in Cincinnati in
Nice.
May.
Is
So
that the
that's
Pigs Fly marathon?
I think that is the Pigs Fly Marathon, but I guess like the Jeff actual man, it usually goes to the Cincinnati one. So that's further for me than Pittsburgh, but then I'll get to follow Jeff himself
So, so
and
really
figure out what he
funny.
looks like.
My family did the goal setting thing too this summer. Everybody has a goal and everything.
Nice.
Um, and then I recently ran a half marathon. I used the Nike Run Club app to do the same thing. Like you just press go and there's a whole program that just guides you through the entire training sessions. And some of them are interval runs, some of them are long runs, some of them are slow runs, all these different things. But
Yeah.
love how the app turns free after 26 miles. That's super cool.
Yeah. And that's what Jason Torres was like. You should be using Nike Run. Like, well, I probably should. I think I actually have that app downloaded. But
Yeah, and they
I'm
talk
using
to
Joggo.
you. They talk to you in
Yes.
your ear too, which is really nice. Does Jago do the same kind of thing?
It does. Yeah, it will. It tells you when to go, but then it'll depending on like what your workout for the day is, it'll be
Yeah.
like, oh, you've gone half a mile, and then it will keep track of it. Like now it's time to speed up.
Nice.
All of that kind of stuff, which is nice to, have that extra coaching.
Yeah.
Sweet.
It is so hot here, by the way. Not want to run right now.
I've
We had
been
a
doing
cool
my runs
last
at
week
like
was so
Good.
hot. It was like in the 90s every day last week, and this week it's been like 60 in the mornings, and I'm like, yeah, I'll go for run either before or after I lift. Yeah, in my plug, just real quick, I did write a blog post this week that talks about the award winners for the State of JS survey. So it talks a little bit about that, a little bit about Selenium too. But I think it's kind of more of a kickoff post. So I'm going to be writing some more about what it means to be a successful open source project.
Very cool. Awesome.
Man, this episode was big. I mean, I almost feel like we need a second half for for the rest of it, like the awards and the other tools section. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out. And oh, perfect. I'll share. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry, I wasn't logged in. It's my bad.
All good. Thanks everybody for hanging out while we record live. And for now, that's all we got. I obviously Work OS is in the corner, so we can count that. It's just a bonus for them. We'll get another one because I want to make sure they get a proper shout out. If you are in chat, Work OS is awesome. Definitely go listen to them or check them out. If you're doing authentication or authorization, they have some fantastic tools. So I think we'll go ahead and call it because this episode was very long. I'm going to go grab some lunch. But yeah, thanks again. We always enjoy it when people are able to attend live. Have a good week.